The winter of 1892 had not been kind to the northern Montana range. Snow clung thick to the branches of the pines, bowing them low, and the wind howled through the canyons like a restless spirit. Tracks of elk and wolf stitched across the drifts, but no man in his right mind lingered long beneath that kind of sky. Yet beneath one of those towering pines where the snow had drifted high, a girl lay bound at the wrists and ankles. The rope had cut cruel into her skin, purple and raw from the cold. Her dress was thin, nothing more than calico rags against the sharp bite of winter, and her breath rattled shallowly from between cracked lips. She didn't know how long she'd been there. Hours, maybe. The world had blurred into white and silence, broken only by the sharp ache in her limbs and the weight of the ropes cutting her down into the snow. They'd left her there, laughing as they did it, like she wasn't worth the trouble of a bullet. Far off, a horse's hooves crunched in the drifts, slow, deliberate, carrying the weight of a man who had learned long ago how to survive in land like this. The mountain man, broad-shouldered with a coat patched from furs, a rifle slung across his saddle, reined his horse to a halt when he spotted the dark figure beneath the tree. For a moment he thought it might be a trick of the snow, just another fallen branch, until he saw her head move weakly. The man's jaw tightened. He swung down from his saddle, boots crunching into the drift, and came closer. The ropes were stiff with ice, cutting so deep into her wrists that it made him wince just looking at it. She opened her eyes, hollow, desperate, and a ragged whisper slipped out. "Please." The mountain man crouched, pulling a knife from his belt. "Hold on, girl, you're not staying here." The steel bit through frozen hemp, and for the first time since they'd tied her down, her hands fell for it. She sobbed from the pain of blood rushing back into them. He didn't waste words. He gathered her up into his arms, her body light and trembling against his chest, and turned back toward his horse. The pines moaned overhead, snow breaking loose from their heavy limbs, and the man knew one thing with certainty. Whoever had left her here had meant for her to die. The mountain man laid her gently across the saddle, steadying her with one hand as his horse shifted under the weight. She was little more than bones and rags, her skin cold as river ice. He swung up behind her, wrapping his coat around her shoulders and drawing her against him. "Stay awake if you can," he muttered against her hair, his voice low and gravelled. He wasn't used to talking much, not to people anyway, but he knew enough to keep her tethered to something other than the snow. "We'll get you warm." Her head lolled against his chest. He urged the horse forward, breaking through the drifts toward the thickest stand of pines he knew. There, sheltered from the worst of the wind, was a place he'd used before, a hollow where stone rose on three sides, a natural cradle for a fire. By the time they reached it, the light was already fading. The winter dusk dropped fast in the highlands, the sky bruising purple before the dark set in. He swung down, pulled her carefully into his arms again, and carried her beneath the overhang of rock. He worked quickly. First the fire. He split kindling with sure hands, striking steel against flint until sparks caught on the dry moss he carried in his pouch. Smoke curled, then flame, then warmth began to lick against the cold. He fed it steady until the blaze rose strong and steady, the kind of fire that wouldn't die easy. Next, he stripped off his outer furs and spread them near the flames. He laid her down, rolling her onto her side so her frozen limbs could thaw with warmth. Outshocking her heart. Her lips trembled, a whisper escaping as though dredged from a dream. "Thought they left me. Gone." His eyes. The fire had burned steady through the night, throwing back the cold that prowled at the edge of the pines. By dawn, the storm had broken, leaving the world muffled in white. Snow clung heavy to the branches above, but inside the stone hollow, there was warmth enough to keep breath from freezing. The mountain man hadn't slept. His rifle rested across his lap, his back against the stone wall, eyes on the girl as much as the dark. Each time her breathing faltered, he leaned forward, listening, waiting. She was caught between worlds, sometimes shivering, sometimes still as death. When morning finally came, she stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused, until they landed on the fire. She blinked, her lips parting as if she didn't believe what she saw. "You're alive," the mountain man said quietly, not moving from his place. Her gaze shifted, meeting his. For the first time, she saw him clearly, the rough beard frosted at the edges, the long hair tucked back under a fur cap, the lines of a face carved by weather and years. A stranger, but not the kind that meant her harm. Her throat worked, dry and raw. "I thought—" She stopped, her voice breaking into a whisper. "I thought I was gone." "You're not," he said, leaning forward to pour water from the kettle into a tin cup. He offered it to her, steadying her trembling hands as she tried to lift it. "Sip. Slow." She obeyed, though each swallow looked painful. The warmth seemed to coax her voice back bit by bit. After a long silence, she rasped, "They left me there." The man's jaw tightened. He didn't ask who. He only said, "Why?" Tears welled, stung her eyes. "Because I wouldn't go quiet." Her words cracked something in him, though his face gave away little. He set the cup aside, shifted closer, and tucked the furs more tightly around her shoulders. She flinched at the touch, not from him, but from memory. He paused, hand still for a moment, then drew it back slow, showing he'd forced nothing. Her breath hitched, shame flickered across her face. "I'm sorry, You don't owe me sorry," he said, voice low but firm, "not for living." Silence filled the hollow, broken only by the pop of the fire. She turned her face toward the flames, her hands curled tight in the fur. For a long while she said nothing. But then, as though the words were being dragged out of her, she whispered, "They came at night. Men I knew. Men the town trusted. Said I'd spoken out of turn. Said a woman ought to keep quiet. They tied me under the pines and said the snow would do the rest." Her voice faltered, but she pushed on, her jaw trembling. I thought I'd die out there and no one would ever know why." The mountain man's eyes burned like the embers. He had seen cruelty before, seen what men could do when they thought no one was watching. But something in her story kindled an anger deeper than most. He stood, feeding another log into the fire. The flames leapt high, throwing sparks against the stone. "Well," he said after a long moment, his voice carrying a weight she couldn't yet name, "those men didn't count on me finding you." Her eyes widened, searching his face. "Why did you?" He crouched again, meeting her gaze level. "Because the woods talk, and I listen." She drew in a shaky breath, as if the very thought that someone had listened when others had turned away was almost too much to bear. The firelight flickered between them, and for the first time since the storm, she let her body lean into the warmth without fighting it. The mountain man said nothing more, but inside, he had already decided he wouldn't just keep her alive. He'd make sure the snow wasn't the only thing that remembered what those men had done. By the second day, the storm had eased, but the woods had gone strangely quiet, as though even the birds didn't dare to break the stillness. Snow lay deep, untouched, save for the narrow path of tracks the mountain man had left when he carried her into the hollow. She was stronger now, her color no longer the pale blue of the dying, her eyes sharper, though they still held the tremble of fear. The fire's warmth had begun to restore what the cold had stolen, but she was far from whole. Her wrists bore deep bruises where the ropes had dug in. She moved carefully, as if her body no longer trusted itself. The mountain man crouched by the mouth of the hollow, scanning the tree line. He'd seen movement at first light, shadows slipping between the pines where no deer should have been. "They're looking," he muttered under his breath. Her head lifted, her voice a whisper. "The men?" He didn't answer right away, but the look in his eyes was enough. Her chest rose and fell fast, shallow. She clutched the fur tighter around her shoulders. "If they find me." "They won't," he said, cutting her fear clean. His tone was steady, like stone in the river. He turned back to her, kneeling so his face was level with hers. "But you've got to trust me. Can you do that?" Her lips parted, hesitation flickering there. She had trusted once before, and it had left her bound in the snow. But here, now, with the fire crackling and his eyes holding hers, she found herself nodding. Yes. He gave a single sharp nod, then moved to his pack. From it he pulled strips of dried meat, wrapped them in cloth, and tucked them into a small pouch. We can't stay here. This hollow's too close to the path. If they circle again, they'll find it. Her eyes widened. You mean, go back out there? It's colder than a grave out there, he said, pulling his heavy coat tight across his chest. But there's a place deeper in the woods, a cabin I built when I was younger, strong walls, a real hearth. You'll live there? She stared at him, as if unsure whether to believe such a place could exist. Then her voice cracked. I can barely walk. Then you lean on me. He stood, too, lowering in the narrow space, and extended his hand. For a long breath she didn't move, her gaze fixed on the calloused palm, so different from the hands that had bound her. But at last, with trembling fingers, she slid her hand into his. He drew her to her feet gently, steadying her when her knees buckled. She swayed, catching her breath, but his grip was sure, unyielding. Outside, the air cut like a blade. Snow glittered under a sky gone pale with thin sunlight. The mountain man adjusted the furs around her, then guided her step by step into the white silence. His rifle hung across his back, his free hand never leaving hers. Behind them, the fire in the hollow sputtered and died, leaving only smoke curling into the morning air. Far off, between the pines, the crunch of another set of boots broke the stillness. The hunters had not given up. And the mountain man knew. This was no longer just about survival. This was about the reckoning that waited in the snow. The pines rose tall around them, their black trunks streaked white with snow. Every step the girl took left a shallow mark beside the deep prints of the mountain man's boots. He bore most of her weight, steady as an oak, his hand gripping her arm firmly when she stumbled. The cold bit hard, the kind that could kill a soul that wasn't moving fast enough, but they pressed on. Her breaths coming ragged, his shoulders bowed against the weight of wind and silence. Not much farther, he told her, though in truth, the cabin was still miles away. Words of comfort were lighter to carry than silence. Her head tilted toward him, eyes squinting under the fur hood he'd pulled close around her face. Why are you helping me? He didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened, and he scanned the trail behind them before replying. Because somebody should have. The simplicity of it struck her. Her throat worked as if to say more, but no words came, only a nod, small but certain. They trudged on. Branches above creaked in the wind. Somewhere far behind, a crow gave a single harsh cry. It was enough to set his nerves. Sharp. He stopped, raising a hand for silence. The girl froze beside him, clutching the fur tighter. Her eyes searched his face. What is it? He cocked his head, listening. Then it came. The faint, unmistakable crunch of boots in the snow. Men moving, not beasts. Her breath hitched, loud in the hush of the forest. They're close, he said, his voice low. Closer than I thought. He glanced at her, then shifted the rifle from his back. We've got two choices. Keep moving and risk them running us down, or... His gaze flicked toward a fallen pine ahead, its trunk hollowed by rot and snow drifted over. A place to vanish, if only for a while. Her voice shook. What if they find us? Then they'll find me first, he said, his tone like iron. For a long breath, she looked at him, the man who had appeared out of the storm, whose fire had brought her back, who now stood between her and the cold hands of death again. Her lips parted, a whisper escaping. I trust you. He nodded once, sharp and sure, then guided her to the hollow of the fallen tree. Snow packed tight around it, but he pulled it loose with his hands, carving out a space just large enough to tuck her inside. Stay quiet. Stay still, he told her, pulling the fur tighter. And then, with a last look, an unspoken promise in his eyes, he turned back to the trail, rifle in hand, footsteps steady as he walked to meet the sound of boots in the snow. The The girl pressed herself into the dark hollow, heart pounding, listening to the crunch of his steps fade into the white silence. Then came the voices, low, harsh, closer. The hunters had come. The wind carried their voices first, hard, bitter tones that cracked like whips in the cold. The girl pressed her body tighter into the hollow log, her breath shallow, hands trembling beneath the fur the mountain man had wrapped her in. Snow sifted down through the pines as boots crunched closer. "Tracks," one man growled. "Fresh," another spat. "He can't be far. Ain't nobody else fool enough to walk this high in a storm." The girl closed her eyes. She could picture them, faces twisted by cruelty. The same hands that had bound her wrists left her to the cold. Her body flinched with the memory, but then she remembered his voice, steady and sure. "Stay quiet. Stay still." Somewhere just ahead, the mountain man moved through the trees. He'd left her tucked in shadow, and now his shape was only a suggestion among the drifting snow. His rifle sat ready in his hands, but he didn't fire, not yet. The pursuers broke through the timberline, their coats dusted white, their eyes sharp. One of them bent, brushing snow from the ground. "See here?" Smaller steps beside his. "He's got her." Their laughter came sharp and cruel, cutting through the silence. "He's protecting her. Imagine that. A mountain rat thinking he can steal what ain't his." The girl's throat burned. She wanted to scream back, to tell them she was no man's possession, but fear pressed her lips shut. A raven croaked overhead, its wings black against the grey sky. The men stilled, eyes scanning. That's when the mountain man stepped into view. He didn't speak at first. His rifle hung steady, aimed at the chest of the nearest one. His voice when it came was low, calm, the kind of calm that carried danger in it. "You boys took what didn't belong to you, left her to die like she was less than nothing." The leader sneered, hand twitching toward his holster. "Ain't your fight, stranger. Walk away, and maybe we'll let you live." The mountain man didn't blink. Snow clung to his beard, his shoulders squared like the pines themselves. "Ain't walking anywhere, not while she still breathes." The forest seemed to hold its breath. The girl's heart hammered so loud she was sure they'd hear it. Then, movement. A hand twitched, a boot shifted. The crack of the first rifle shot shattered the stillness. Snow exploded from a tree trunk as the men scattered for cover. The mountain man dove. The gunfire echoed sharp against the mountain walls, then fell into a tense silence broken only by the rasp of wind through the pines. The girl's breath misted in the dark hollow of the log, each exhale shallow, ragged. She clutched the edge of the fur around her shoulders, willing herself to stay small, stay still, just as he told her. But her heart betrayed her. It pounded so hard she thought it might rattle the snow loose above her hiding place. A shout cut the silence, rough, guttural. One of the men had been hit. She couldn't see, but the sound told her enough. Then came another voice, closer. "You can't take us all, old man. You'll run out of bullets before we run out of fire." She bit her lip, tasting blood. Fear surged through her like the cold itself. But behind the fear, something else stirred. Anger. These were the same men who had tied her, left her in the snow like garbage. She had been nothing to them, less than nothing. The log creaked faintly as she shifted, crawling toward its edge. Through the snow she saw him, the mountain man, crouched low behind the boulder. His face was a mask of quiet focus, eyes sharp beneath his hat brim. Smoke curled from the muzzle of his rifle. One of the pursuers flanked wide, creeping along the ridge. The mountain man hadn't seen him yet. The girl's chest seized. She wanted to call out, but her voice stuck like ice in her throat. Her gaze darted to the ground, to the heavy branch half buried in the snow beside her hiding place. It wasn't much, but it was something. Her hands shook as she reached for it. Her fingers, raw, cracked from the cold, curled around the rough bark. For a moment she only clung to it, heart hammering, asking herself if she dared. Then she thought of the chains biting into her wrists, of the night they left her to freeze, of the way her body had curled in on itself, waiting for death until his hands cut her free. Her grip tightened. She rose from the hollow like a shadow, silent as the snow. The man on the ridge never saw her coming. She swung the branch with every ounce of rage and fear and will she had left. It cracked against his skull with a sickening thud. He staggered, dropped his gun, and crumpled into the snow. The sound drew the others. Shouts erupted. The mountain man turned, eyes flashing when he saw her standing there, chest heaving, weapon trembling in her hands. She expected anger, a curse, but instead his mouth set firm, his voice carrying across the storm. Good. Don't stop now. The forest exploded with fire again, and this time she was no longer just a victim hiding in the snow.